Every Thursday at 7 o'clock, something I hope that you'll find interesting. Geology next week, urban trees the week after. But tonight we are focusing on native plants. And to do that, we've got 4 wonderful guests with us tonight, who I'm so happy that they're joining us. We're joined by first John Janick, who is the proprietor, the owner of Good Host Plants Native Plant Nursery. Good Host Plants, of course, has a website, and they've been a partner with us on our native plant sales for many years now. Hey, John, welcome. John, you're here, I hope. There you are. He's going to unmute himself. Oh, there you are. Okay, no worries.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm here.
Good, good. Good to see you. Welcome. Glad you're here. Especially this is your Christmas season. If you're like a small business proprietor or springtime, this time it's like this is your Christmas season, right?
Oh, yeah. Christmas rush.
Good, good. Okay. We're also joined by Max Paschall, who is the native plant coordinator at the Schuylkill Center, and he's the guru of our own native plant cell. Hey, Max.
Hi.
You're doing a great job with our plant cell. Thank you. So anybody, when you order a plant on our website, Max is the one who's going to be taking care of it. So welcome, Max. We're also joined by Tam Paulitz, who is a volunteer on the native plant program. So she's been a volunteer with us and helping us grow and plant many native plants. Hey, Tam.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. So glad you're here. Thank you. And then our 4th guest is Steve Goin, who's the Director of Land and Facilities at the Schuylkill Center, an arborist. He's our official tree planter at the Schuylkill Center. So he's going to get our tree questions tonight. Hey, Steve.
Hi, how are you doing?
Right, so we're actually native plants, but we're extending it into trees. So if you got tree questions, please do that. So I'm glad the 4 of you are here. It's really great that you're here. Amanda Cohen, by the way, is on the staff. She's our manager of public programs, and she can help you out if any Zoom issues arise as she can, but she's putting in the chat some links for you to check out. And we've got our first question already, but Jeanette, hold your question for 1 minute, because one of the things we're going to do over the course of this hour is each of the 4 guests is going to share a special native plant and a special relationship that native plant has with another living creature. So each of the 4 have something teed up for us, and we're going to just spend a minute on or 2 on each. And John, you're going to kick us off with your special native plant.
Yeah, so this is always a tough question. You know, it's usually depending on the time of year. I would have a different favorite, especially if I was in the taking a walk on the wildflower loop or the ravine loop. See all the spring ephemerals right now at the Schuylkill Center. But yeah, I chose milkweed, specifically swamp milkweed, Asclepias incarnata. I mean, as everyone probably knows, you know, the monarch population has been in decline for a few decades for various reasons, and the only host plant it has is Asclepias. So plant a milkweed, you could get monarch caterpillars. The most common ones you'll see available are these 3 here. The top left, butterfly milkweed, to the right, common milkweed, and the bottom is swamp. You'll get caterpillars on all monarch caterpillars on all those. I've found through, you know, the non-scientific method of raising them with my kids over the years is that they really love the swamp milkweed leaves. They'll eat all 3, but they really seem to like the swamp. I mean, it's not just for monarchs too. I mean, it's great for pollinators, from bumblebees, honeybees, longhorn bees, wasps, different flies. I've seen a random hummingbird visit it for nectar. You can see the adult monarch butterflies coming to it for nectar, along with like swallowtails, skippers, fritillaries.
So let's tease it out for a second, because what you got is 2 things going on. One is the plant is the host plant for the caterpillar of the monarch, right?
Yeah. So
it has to, the female has to lay her eggs there. But then secondly, when when I moved into my house 30 years ago, we had a sloppy gardener who lived ahead of us, which I was grateful for, because there was a small row of milkweed up against the chimney. And I was like, hallelujah, one of the few people who's, so we've had this stand of milkweed, and it's a remarkable odor in the spring when it first blooms. It's the nectar is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like, you know, maybe an underappreciated pure like pollinator plant. I mean, there's such a diverse array of pollinators that come to it. And I mean, it's not, as the name implies, you know, it doesn't like to dry out. It does like ideally like wet sun, but it is adaptable to pretty much any garden setting in like full to part sun. Last year we had a drought in June. It was about the entire month where we didn't get any rain, temps in the 80s to 90s. And a lot of these did get, I have a demo garden at my nursery on Front and West Erie, and a lot of these did get kind of fried without additional irrigation. It was a really rough month, but they bounced back somewhat. They're all emerging this time of year, and this is, you know,
right.
Milkweed come up a little late, so if you've never planted them, I would always recommend using either a plant label or a popsicle stick, something like that, to mark
Right.
where you have it planted, because a lot of things will come up and you'll be like, well, where's my milkweed? And you end up kind of planting something else there and digging up the milkweed just before it was about to emerge. So they come up, you know, like mid-April.
Right.
Late April.
So I found, you know, common milkweed on the right gets to be like 6 feet tall. That might overpower some gardens, but the other two on the left are a little daintier, maybe better for home gardens. Does that make sense?
I mean, they're all a great benefit. I mean, the common's a little, if you don't have the space, it could, it also reseeds pretty readily. So it could crowd out some things. Swamp milkweed kind of plays really nice with other plants. I love butterfly milkweed. It does needs full sun, has better drought tolerance than swamp milkweed. But in terms of just getting into natives, you want to help the monarchs. If you're going to go with one that's like the most foolproof, I mean, I think swamp would be the easiest for the beginners, but I mean, any of these are great. If you have the room, by all means, grow the common milkweed.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that. Yep, and the monarchs need all the help they can get, no question. Actually, when I was a young naturalist in my first job, just out of college, I saw this small orange plant growing in a field, this orange flowering plant, and it had all these butterflies flying all around it. And I'm sitting with my field guide, and the field guide suddenly came to butterfly weed. I just cracked up because it was telling me its name. It was like covered in 4 different butterflies. Anyway, all right. Thank you, John. So we're going to come back to our other guests as we go through the hour. We've got a couple of questions coming up already for any one of you, any one of the 4. Jeanette says she planted Aronia black chokeberry about 10 years ago. She bought it here at our native plant sale. Thank you, Jeanette. I did not know and did not ask that it grows by suckers. Any solution to the suckering other than cutting them vigorously? Thanks. First of all, what are suckers? Who's got that?
Suckers, usually that's the sprouting at the base of the plant. It can actually originate out of the roots and come out of the ground. It's usually a very vigorous growing part of the plant. It'll, actually it's funny that this question's being asked. I mean, it sounds like this chokeberry is doing really well. A 10-year-old plant. It's growing suckers vigorously. That's the opposite problem I usually deal with Aronia. I hear more about folks finding them a little bit thin and spindly. But most of the time when you have aggressive growing suckers, if you can manage that by pruning 1/3 or just trying to restore the crown without doing too much cutting, that sucker growth will end up slowing down. That's really what I would suggest. Cutting them as close to the base of the plant without disrupting that branch collar, where it actually emerges out of the plant, would be really helpful. And yeah, I would enjoy that really well-growing Aronia.
Yeah. Jeanette added, it's in bloom right now. It's in a Roxborough backyard. Lots of other native plants around it.
That's great. Yeah. And to just piggyback off of what Steve was saying. So Aronia, I believe, is a pome fruit, which means it's in like the same family as apples and pears. And I know one thing that orchardists like to do if they have an apple tree that's growing way too quickly or too vigorously, one strategy they'll use is pruning in summertime. Everyone says, okay, you should prune your apple trees, your pears or your Aronias in winter when it's a little bit safer, it's a little bit cooler, it's dormant. But pruning in summer tends to like really slow the growth a lot and kind of force it back in a way that winter pruning can actually encourage it to grow more. So yeah, if you prune it in another month or two, that may help as well.
Right. Good. Thank you, Max. So this is the Native Plant Hotline. Our guests are Max Paschall, John Janick, Tam Pollitt, Steve Goin. If you got questions about native plants, you got sunny spots, you got shady spots, you got plants that need A, plants that need B, you don't want C, put them in chat and we'll be asking them of them. Hey, Tam, how did you get involved with native plants?
It was a gradual process. I just started hiking around the local parks and just looking to see what was around, and flowers caught my attention. I started taking pictures, wondering what they are. And I eventually started learning what they were. And when I saw the word alien next to some of them, I said, is that a problem? And I learned more and just kept asking questions. And the more I learned, the more I realized how important the natives are. And I really should be championing those.
Yeah.
So once I got started, I just really went in head first.
Yeah, why don't each of you share a reason why you think native plants are important, or why should we plant with natives over impatiens, begonias, etc.? Tell me, why should we bother?
Well, the main thing is what we're talking about tonight is these associations with wildlife, and particularly with insects. So many of the vast majority of them have very specific food needs for their offspring. And when you think about it, when a butterfly lays one egg on one leaf, it's most likely that type of leaf is going to be the only thing that insect will eat until it becomes an adult. So the parent has to choose very wisely. If it puts it on the wrong plant, the insect won't be able to digest it. It won't thrive. It won't do well. So they've, over hundreds of years, thousands of years, however long it takes, they've all specialized in this way. And once they found the insect companion plant that works best for them, or the group of plants, they thrive. And once they're each in their own category, they're not competing with each other as much either.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, have a different reason for why native plants as opposed to protecting biological diversity of these other relationships?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you
Go ahead.
speaking with Timmy or Tam?
Go ahead, Max. Go ahead, Max.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No. So yeah. Beyond what Tam was saying, which I think is very much like the prime reason right now. One thing I like to think about when looking at just driving around Philadelphia, living here, is thinking about what this area was ecologically, let's say 400 years ago, and before Philadelphia even existed. And it was this patchwork of old growth forests and fields and meadows and young woodland, and it was this fantastically diverse place. If you drive through like the Smokies or Shenandoah National Park, that's closer to what Philadelphia was ecologically than what we have today. And so for me, like planting natives is, partly just starting to undo some of the damage that we've done and to create, like, reestablish that beauty and biodiversity that used to be here.
That's great. Thank you. John, different reason than these two? Both are good. You got a different reason?
I think you could just have, with natives, you could get the same beauty, but with a function. They have an ecological benefit. I mean, another something different I would say is like they tend to look more natural to me, like instead of things like really crazy colors blooming like really early. When you think of like going to the woods or like in a wild space, like you kind of subliminally remember that color palette and everything. And I think a lot of the natives are a little more like muted and they blend in with their backgrounds. Just a more natural look to me.
Thank you. Claire has a question. She loves some recommendations for shade-loving plants. She has loads of hostas. John, you want to kick us off?
Oh,
Shade-loving plants outside of hostas.
I would say definitely go for a walk on the wildflower loop or the ravine loop, and then you'll see a bunch of great examples. I think the Virginia bluebells are kind of wrapping up at this point. Bloodroot was about a month ago. Trout lily.
It was, right?
Phlox, Jacob's ladder, just so many. Yeah, if you have
Trilliums.
shade, this is your prime time right now.
Actually, so you mentioned this twice, so I need to do a shout out. So the Ravine Loop is one of our key trails. So when you want to come this weekend, go to the front desk, ask for a map, ask them where the wildflowers are on the Ravine Loop, and actually ask for the wildflower loop. So you walk through the wildflower loop to get to the Ravine Loop. And as you walk through the wildflower loop, you will first pass Mayapple, Blue Cohosh, Shooting Star, Jacob Ladder, our one toad shade trillium, who's probably done by now, but we have one plant in the whole 340 acres. And then you get down to a whole bunch of, there's like 3 different violets at least. Then you get down Ravine Loop and turn left, and skunk cabbage is long done, bloodroot is done, but that's where the trout lily is, and the white and red trillium, and the Virginia bluebells. And Solomon seal and false Solomon seal are both there as well. So, and you got to see giant chickweed if you haven't met giant chickweed yet. So there's a whole bunch of, so check out the Ravine Loop. Anyway,
I'm looking through our catalog here and I see we have wild ginger. We've got alum root, heucheras, golden ragwort does well in the shade. And that's blooming right now, bright yellow flowers. Let's see, what do we have?
wild ginger is a great plant. If I could just chime in, because it makes a big clump of these heart-shaped flowers, so it's beautiful. And then if you raise the leaves up, I'm sorry, heart-shaped leaves. If you raise the leaves up, you'll find that kind of jug-shaped purple-red flower sitting on the ground, trying to get ants to crawl in. So it's a really interesting flower. Go ahead, Tim.
A great ground cover, which is sometimes difficult to find. So
right.
You can enjoy it all season long and have it growing amongst other more showy plants.
Right. Tam, tell people what you're looking at actually, because you've got a key document.
I'm looking at our very own catalog for the Schuylkill Center.
Yeah, so it's online, right?
So it's online, yes.
All right.
I would just say quick, about 8 years ago, when I went to the Schuylkill spring sale, I picked up like 2 of the Canada wild ginger, planted it at my last house, and we moved out last summer, but that patch turned into about 10 feet long, about 2-3 feet deep, so it spreads.
And the nice thing about it is that other plants will grow up through it pretty easily. It doesn't compete with things very much. It does keep the ground covered, keeps the ground cool. And so you don't have to put a lot of mulch down, or any mulch in some places. And the ants will take the seeds and carry them around different places. So they pop up in unexpected places. Oh,
it's true. It's true. Yeah, there are several plants. White trillium does that, trout lily, ginger. So they practice, so the seed has this little fatty tissue attached to it called an elaeosome, and the ant loves the elaeosome, so carries the seed with the elaeosome attached to it, brings it underneath into and puts it in like a little, a cupboard underground, and the ants all eat that, and then it gets put in the waste bin or in this other side tunnel over here, and this way it's just full of other seeds that all sprout. So ants are amazing gardeners, and flowers in the coevolution of flowers and insects. Flowers have figured out ways to seduce ants into planting them underground. That's great. Great. And Jeanette mentions alum root, heuchera does well in the shade. So Max, you just put in the chat. There we go. The link to our native plant sale, and also John's nursery at Good Host Plants. Thank you, Max. Max, let's turn to you for a moment. I'll share my screen, and we're gonna ask you to share your plant-animal relationship, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I chose goldenrod, which is the genus Solidago. It has about 130 species native to North America. They range from like 7 feet tall to just a few inches. Incredible diversity and function in the landscape. Most importantly, they tend to blossom in the late summer or early fall when there's very few flowers in the landscape for pollinators. So every single year, they are an absolutely crucial source of pollen for a wide range of bees, wasps, moths, butterflies, you name it. But the relationship I want to talk about today is actually the gall, like that forms on the goldenrod that you'll oftentimes see in the summer, even into the winter. And there's actually a number of different species of midges, flies, moths, you name it, that actually create these galls. And so, for instance, this one is the goldenrod gallfly, and it will lay an egg inside the tissue of the plant and exude this chemical that triggers the plant to form this very thick tissue, like very hard, very thick tissue around it. And so it manifests as oftentimes as, you know, this bulge in the plant itself. And inside that is this little critter just growing until it pupates and emerges. But what's fascinating is that there's multiple levels of ecology that essentially happen as a result of this. So for instance, let's see if I can find this. Yeah, one of them is the goldenrod bunch gall midge. So when you see a goldenrod plant that has this floret of green on top, that's this one specific insect. And I'm going to read a quote here from a biologist named Beatrice Moisset. And she wrote, "The larva of this midge injects special substances into the tips of the goldenrod stems. These substances stimulate an unusual, vigorous sprouting of the growing stem and leaves. A tight bunch or cluster of leaves with a nutritious, tender center develops. These clusters can be quite numerous in a field of goldenrods. They are easy to spot and are known by the name of bunch galls. They provide both nourishment and shelter to the insect." The story doesn't end there. The midge creates conditions favorable to other small creatures when it builds the bunch gall. Tiny beetles and wasps find a nice place to hide and even raise their families in the bunches of leaves. Curiously, the galls go beyond that. When dead, they become compost and enrich the soil on a larger scale than goldenrod plants free from galls. This is reminiscent of what beavers do. These animals build dams which provide habitat for fish and frogs and other animals. This has earned them the name of ecosystem engineers. The goldenrod gall midge is also an ecosystem engineer, although on a smaller scale. It is surprising how such an insignificant and easily ignored tiny insect can contribute to the web of life. So whenever I'm like walking through a meadow or a field, or even in front of the Schuylkill Center in the summer or fall, where you'll see some goldenrod coming up, whenever I see those galls, I remember that host plants aren't just for like the beautiful butterflies and moths. It can even be for much less attractive, but equally
Right.
vital and important insects as well.
That's great. Thank you, Max. That's great. And actually that connects back to John and his monarchs, because if you're a monarch butterfly trying to get to Mexico, one of the things you need is nectar and pollen to get there, or nectar to get there. And this is the last source of nectar in the year. So if you're a migrating monarch, you're looking for goldenrod to get to. So that's great. All right. Kevin says lots of good suggestions here. I also like foam flower, Tiarella, as a plant with similar sun soil needs as hostas and lovely spring blooms. Tiarella. Anybody else like foam flower? Actually, I love the name means little tiaras. Go ahead, Tam.
I love it. It's blooming right now and it's just getting started, and the foam flower is the right name for it. The flowers just look like foam.
So you should come to the Schuylkill Center for a walk, but if you want to see foam flower, the Mount Cuba Center in Delaware has, oh my God, uncountable foam flower in bloom right now, plus the world's best trillium collection. So you want to do both, but that's great. Ruth lost a hydrangea to, wow, rhizoctonia. I love recommendations to replace it. Location is next to my front porch, part shade, near, wow, I don't know this one, Iriope and rust-colored astilbes. Great question. Who's got that one?
I think there's a lot of great opportunities for planting there. So for instance, one plant that I've really fallen in love with this season is just arrowwood, which is Viburnum dentatum. It's a beautiful native viburnum, similar size as hydrangeas, also has like the really pretty white flowers. And that's an excellent choice. I think Clethra alnifolia or sweet pepperbush, that's another native shrub that has similar size, light conditions, and function in the landscape. And if you want to attract pollinators, Clethra also, the flowers, they're a little bit higher up, but they're just buzzing with insects when it blooms. And then of course, if your site, I'm not sure what the soil acidity is like, but if it's a little bit more acidic, or you can get it to acidic, mountain laurel, like you really can't beat that for evergreen beauty and flowers. So I think there's some great choices there.
Great.
And I'll just piggyback on that as well. Those are excellent suggestions there, Max. And what we were talking about previously, the foam flower, everything Max just mentioned, and the foam flower as well, we're expecting to get more of in the native plant nursery. I mean, we couldn't believe the amount of interest this year. Plants were just flying out the door, which is wonderful. And we were able to secure more plants to come in probably next week, right, Max?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're hoping for some new plants on Wednesday, starting to be available the next day.
That's great. Okay, good. Amanda has a super small backyard and no grass, so everything is container gardening. If there's space in a pot, can plants continue to be packed in? Or do too many plants in a pot create unnecessary competition? Are there some specific natives that are good for container gardening? Great question.
Looking through some emails that I sent out answering other questions from the plant sale. So I'm trying to find that now so I can give you a list of things. I can say that you want to have a deep pot for the most part, because you want to allow room for the roots to really extend more than you would for annuals. And try not to crowd them too much. But the trick is to find groups of plants that have different bloom times and long-lasting good foliage. So let me see if I can find what I had sent out before to give you some ideas. I think Tiarella was one of them, that the leaves look good for a long time. So you'll have flowers in the spring and then the leaves will be looking nice afterward. And the native grasses, if they're not too big varieties, are really good for pots because they just give you a nice texture that lasts for the whole season. A lot of them have an inflorescence at the end of the season. So that makes it showier.
Can they stay out over winter in the pot? They just overwinter in the pot,
yeah.
that'll be okay.
Yeah, I think if your zone, if you check the zone range and you go 2 zones colder than here, so I believe we're at a zone 7 here. So if you get a plant that can handle down to a zone 7, you should be fine in a pot. Some of the pots, you can put them in a garage or up against the south side of your house or something along those lines to improve the zone range. That's another way to do it.
Yeah, just to expand on that, what Tam's saying is that, a pot is more exposed than the ground. And so it's more apt to maybe dry out faster.
That's right.
It's not as well insulated, both in the cold of the winter and the heat of the summer. So if you can take some steps to try to kind of fight that situation a little bit, it really helps.
Right.
Some of the plants that were coming to my mind are like columbine. You know, it's a little blue stem. You know, you're looking for plants that are particularly hardy, and to try to address some of that competition as part of the question, you really have to see what the plants are doing. The Tam really mentioned the depth of the pot, how important that is. Most of our native plants have much deeper root systems than like the annuals that you pick up at the garden store. And so you need to give them room, and that same room comes into play when you're looking at the amount of competition that's going on.
That's great. Thank you.
One
I've got a list of plants here if you wanted to just run down. The pink catchfly, wild pink, or it's short and sweet is the variety that we have. Dwarf crested iris. I think we're out of the columbine right now. The foam flower we have. Beard tongue is a really nice one for a pot. Let's see. Tick seeds will work because they're a little bit smaller. And anise hyssop. Purple coneflower.
Wow.
That tick seed, the thread leaf is known to be good in containers. I mean, that's a really great year-round interest plant too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that it can. I haven't seen it in pots, but it just seems to me that it's a size that can handle it. And it just, you know, from what I know of it, the way that it grows in the garden, it seems like one that would be reasonably well behaved. The other thing that you should keep in mind is if you're mixing different kinds of plants together in the same pot, is to check for the conditions that they like. So if you have one that requires really good drainage, don't put it in the same pot with something that really needs to have a lot of moisture. And if it needs a lot of moisture, you're going to want a heavier mix and soil mix and water it very regularly.
Great.
And if it's something that wants drainage, add a little extra rice hulls or perlite to improve the drainage.
I'm going to put a plug in for columbine that I mentioned a couple of times now because it's bright red and it's going to be a hummingbird flower. So hummingbirds will come in for that. So that's somebody we haven't talked about yet. Kevin wants to know if we can name some easygoing cornerstone species that are particularly useful to beneficial insects and other wildlife for both sun and shade. Species that are particularly useful to beneficial insects and other wildlife for both sun and shade.
I like anything in the mint family.
In the mint family, yeah.
Yeah, so we have downy wood mint right now. We, you know, we had what was it? A bergamot that was really good. And there's really nothing beats mountain mint. All the pycnanthemum species.
The pollinators go crazy for them.
It's a mouthful, but I'll spell it in the chat right now. But it's whenever I'm in a field, the one flower I see all the pollinators just congregating around is always the mountain mint, the pycnanthemum. So, and of course, goldenrod in fall. So there's a lot of great ones.
John, you got any?
I mean, I'd say for shadier spots with the mountain mint, I'd say probably pycnanthemum mudicum or flexuosum would probably do a little better in shade. I've grown mudicum in like pretty shady conditions and it's still bloomed. I mean, they're all awesome pollinator plants. Not quite the pollinator powerhouse, but I mean, Pachyra is great for sun and shade. It's we mentioned it before, it's got the yellow flower that's blooming right now, evergreen foliage, and I use it as like a green mulch where you could plant it with a lot taller things in a full sun meadow. So in the spring, when you cut everything back, you'll see the evergreen foliage, the yellow flowers this time of year. And then when everything else grows in, like 5-6 feet tall plants, it's right at home in the shade, still spreading, crowding out weeds, and just acting like a mulch. So that's another good one.
Great. Tam, would you mind sharing your plant with us right now, the one that you picked for us?
Sure, absolutely.
Here's yours.
Actually, that's not mine.
Ah.
That one. There we go.
There we go.
This is the American lady butterfly. And for quite some time now, I have been misidentifying this as a painted lady because they look so close the same. And I was very surprised when I was trying to decide which was my better picture that they weren't the same butterfly. So when I looked this up, this is American lady butterfly, Vanessa virginiensis, and it's like its look-alike. It consumes a lot of the plants in the aster family, but this one is much more specific than the painted lady butterfly. Painted lady will eat a number of different things besides the aster family, but this one wants the cudweed group of asters, which is an unusual group of plants that we don't really think about or see very often. They're just beautiful butterflies, and they're so wonderful to see. Their favorite food happens to be pussy toes, which is something that we happen to have in our plant sale. And a lot of people aren't familiar with this. So this is something that wants to be in a rocky area, on a slope. It wants to be dry. It wants poor soil. You don't want to fuss with this one at all. Doesn't want to get wet. It doesn't matter what kind of soil it is so much, as long as it has drainage. These happen to be growing in New Hampshire, and they grow all over the place in the granite state. But there are a lot of places in Pennsylvania that they would work really well as well. And I think about when I'm on the western side of the city, and it's very hilly here. And so many of the neighborhoods around here have these cutaway front lawns that go down steep to the street. And I'm thinking, this is a perfect place for these. They really do well because they stay close to the ground and just spread like an ever creeping mat. The base foliage is pretty much evergreen or close to evergreen. And then in the spring, right about this time, they send up these wands. And this one, the scientific name is Antenaria plantaginifolia. So antenaria means it looks like antennas. So they're little wires with these knobs on the top. And plantaginifolia means that the leaves look like plantains. And they grow the same way. You have a rosette of leaves that is close down to the ground and holds on tight, and it prevents erosion. So that's what you're looking for on a steep slope. And then it just sends up these in the springtime, and they all bloom at the same time. So what happens is the butterfly lays its eggs on the leaves. When the caterpillars hatch, they climb up the antenna up to the top, and they make a little silk nest around the knob of the flower. Now the flower has no petals, so it just has the center part of the flower. So they're not particularly showy. And because it makes a silk nest around that, it blends right in with those flowers, and it hides there during the day. Then it climbs out at night and does its browsing, eating the leaves down at the base during the nighttime when nobody's around to see them. So they have a clever way of hiding, and they're very particular about this plant. That's what they want their babies to eat. So
It's a pretty
I think
butterfly.
it's a
That's
wonderful
awesome.
thing that everybody should, if you've got one of those tough, dry spots, that's the plant you want.
Great, thank you. Olga wants to know, where can I get a male persimmon tree for a female or vice versa? Is there a way to know which is which? I got a great looking young tree at the Schuylkill Center. It doesn't say the sex, and I heard you can't tell until it blooms. Who can help her out with persimmons?
Yeah, so persimmons is definitely tough. You know, they can take some years to bloom, and you know, if you want to be sure that you have a male to pollinate, so we don't have this, but there are nurseries where you can order a specifically male persimmon that's been grafted onto a rootstock, so you know for sure that what the sex is. And I believe the cultivar is called meter male. L1 Meter was a persimmon breeder in New Hampshire decades ago, and so his selection of male persimmon is one that you can get online. And I know at least one nursery, I believe it's called Hidden Springs Nursery in Tennessee. I think they have that. Yeah, so I hope that helps.
Great, thank you. Michelle is new to natives and wildflowers, looking to plant in an area bordering veggie beds, concerned about self-seeding. She's seen descriptions. Does that mean the seeds can float around and possibly grow anywhere? Suggestions for plants that will stay relatively contained and not spread to the nearby beds uncontrollably. Thank you. Well, you can eat many of these natives, but go ahead. John, Tam?
I'd recommend mountain mint again, pycnanthemum, because I mean, some of them do spread, but definitely not uncontrollably. They're easy to thin out. But a lot of the wasps that they attract, like there's the tomato hornworm, for example. One of the wasps will parasitize the tomato hornworm. And so it's like free pest control, pollinators for your veggies, definitely mountain mint.
And some plants will spread by rhizome underground and pop up in the vegetable, right? Is that going to happen, John?
Are they raised beds? Then I wouldn't worry about them. I don't believe that is a reseeder. It spreads by rhizomes.
Right. Anybody else want to offer some thoughts on self-seeding in veggie beds?
I think the tick seed might be pretty well behaved, and it's relatively small, easier to control. So that would be a nice flowering plant to have, attracting pollinators near the garden without causing trouble.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I
go
think
ahead,
that
Steve.
this is a really important point to bring up, and I'm so glad that Michelle is thinking of gardening this way. You know, it's a type of integrated pest management and strategy that a lot of people employ, and you know, having your native plants nearby just benefiting the garden and providing that pest control is so great. And you know, it's homes for those beneficial insects, as well as food sources, and you know, it's really how we all ought to get better at gardening. To me, you know, I think that having a native plant pop up here and there in my vegetable garden would be well worth it. I would take that and plant it, you know, wherever I have space somewhere else. So I think it's a small price to pay to do a little extra weeding for all the extra services that would be provided by those native plants.
That's great. If you have questions, keep putting them into chat. Since Steve, you just talked, why don't I have you share your plant with us? And Steve, you'll appreciate this. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's raining hard, at least where I am right now. So I think it's been dry. So maybe it's good that it's raining. Of course, there is something to be said about the way it rains now. Instead of nice gentle rains, we tend to get these big. Anyway, Steve, go ahead.
Boy, after all those Earth Day trees that we just put in, Mike, I am really glad to be here in that rain.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah, it has been dry. So if you've been planting, if you've been gardening, a little extra water really would help. I'm not sure how much rain we're going to get.
Yeah.
My plant that I'm going to share here today is the spice bush. We have a lot of spice bush, and then in the same family is sassafras. We have these plants throughout the Schuylkill Center, and they're really important because they support what is my favorite caterpillar. A lot of people talk about their favorite butterflies, but I have a favorite caterpillar, the spice bush swallowtail caterpillar. I just think is super cool, and I owe a lot to that caterpillar. I think it really turned the way that I think about the ecology of our landscapes when I discovered it. The spice bush is really a fantastic shrub. It'll grow 6 to 12 feet. I mean, it can get quite big. It's one of the earliest flower nectar providers in the forest, and so we can see that in the picture in the upper right corner. And the butterfly, the swallowtail really has it's a very handsome butterfly with the black wings and the light blue kind of appearance. I'll share my picture from 15 years ago here on the next slide. In the upper left corner, I discovered this caterpillar, and it just amazed me to see what is this defense mechanism where the caterpillar curls up its head and these two big eye spots kind of get bulged out, and it would, if you were a bird and you were turning the corner of a leaf, think that you might be staring at a snake or something that might eat you. So I think it's pretty neat that way. And the caterpillar needs, at least in our area, needs spice bush or sassafras in order to feed. Those are really the only two common plants in our area that it feeds on. The butterfly will, of course, visit a number of different nectar producers. But that spice bush, I think, is a special plant because it's somewhat deer resistant. And at the Schuylkill Center, we have a lot of deer, and they tend not to hit it too hard. So it's not your showiest fall color. It's kind of that pale yellow in the bottom left of the screen. But it does have those bright red berries, which is really nice and great for birds. The sassafras, which is not often planted into our landscapes, but if you happen to have it growing in your side yard or in some forested area, boy, it's hard to beat like that really cool wavy form to the tree and the bright foliage. It's a stunner in the fall.
It is true, yeah. The tree kind of wiggles as it grows up, which is great. It's a great caterpillar, thank you. All right. Kevin says, maybe it's just my imagination, but many of the most commonly available native plants seem to be native to Western PA and beyond. Why might that be? Something about where the native plant movement got started, or maybe something about typical garden soil? Anybody have thoughts on that?
I mean, he may be referring to a lot of our native meadow species. Tend to come from where meadows were really native, or we had like out in Missouri and beyond, those grassland species. We kind of co-opted a lot of those and brought them east, and refer to them as native because they're so great. And a lot of the same species of wildlife and insects that utilize them out there also utilize them here in Pennsylvania. That's the only thing that's coming to my mind. Native is a difficult thing to really peg down. It's like not only native to where, but native to when. And the Native American Indians, others have been on our land for a long time, changing what may or may not have been native.
Anybody else have thoughts on?
The climate and the ecology is different, and it's the fact that you have the Appalachian Mountain Range that's dividing the state. So you've got something totally different happening on the other side of the state. This area was primarily woodlands dominant throughout the region, and on the other side of the mountains, it was dominated by meadows.
Yep. Great. So it's a couple minutes before 8. We'll go to about 5 after. I got a couple more questions, so if you want to sneak one more in, please do. Liz wants to know if there are any native plants that help with mosquito control, or at least don't promote them. Mosquito control, can any native plants help with that?
So I haven't found anything. This is something that I've been just trying to find for years. I'm always, because I've always lived in areas with mosquito-y backyards, and it's been driving me like up the wall. So not to keep beating this drum, but mountain mint pycnanthemum is a lot very strong minty.
It's the plant
odor.
of the night.
Yeah. And any kind of like strong odor plant will help to distract and confuse insects like mosquitoes that use essentially smell as a way to to detect prey, right? So, they're trying to sniff us out. If there's a very aromatic plant nearby, it tends to push them off. Those plants also attract beneficial predatory insects like wasps, things like that, that can help control the mosquito population as well. On a more long-term level, having bats is a fantastic way, and bats love to roost in sugar maple, black gum, loblolly pine, and a couple anything that has like shaggy bark,
Shag bark.
hickory.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So making sure that those are preserved in your neighborhood is a great choice, and making sure bats have a water source, and also toads as well, making sure that there's a suitable habitat for native toads.
Yeah, that's great. Good.
And dragonflies.
Ah, right. So how do you keep dragonfly? How do you entice dragonflies to be around?
Dig a wildlife pond would be number one, but if you
That
don't
encourages
have,
mosquitoes too.
well, once you get the dragonflies, you won't have a mosquito problem anymore. I mean, I have a retention basin that I had a mosquito problem, and then the dragonflies showed up, and there's no more dragonfly larvae in there. The adults are already out patrolling now that the weather's hotter.
Right. And the adult dragonfly is nicknamed mosquito hawk. They catch adult mosquitoes, and the nymph stage of the dragonfly lives underwater and stalks the larval stage of the mosquito underwater. So both stages of the dragonfly eat both stages of the mosquito.
They're the most efficient predator on Earth, and they devour mosquitoes throughout their adult form, their larval form. The dragonfly larva can overwinter under the ice. So
right. So the dragonflies are living fossils. They've been around like that forever, and mosquitoes belong to the most advanced clan, the flies of all the insects. But the dragonflies get the last laugh a lot. All right. Jeanette says last summer, the small native sunflowers were besieged by red aphids that she could not control. I think some are poking up now. Any advice about controlling aphids naturally? Probably should not buy ladybugs from the hardware store, right? We don't want to be introducing non-native ladybugs like we have been. Max, you're nodding. Any help with ladybugs? Or I'm sorry, with aphids?
I wish I did. Nothing's coming to mind at the moment, though.
Yeah, that's a real tough one. Doing some mechanical control can help. Basically, a gloved hand doing a little smear action might help you get control. The washing them off with water might help to reduce the population.
Does a spray bottle with soapy water do anything?
Well, I'm not a big fan of using soapy water. There are some organically registered horticultural oils and soaps that could be used if you're really in a pinch. But if trying to get the beneficial insects to find the pest insects is really where you want to be. I can tell you that we used to squirt Sprite soap when doing some beneficial releases, knowing that kind of imitates the sugary substance that the aphids are dropping, and then that tells the beneficial insects, hey, there's a food source around here, just go find it. So it's those are kind of the best suggestions I have. That and looking at where you're growing. Aphids can, they tend to like those places that are more of a harbor and a safe haven. So and hot. If there's heat bouncing and radiating off of a wall that's also sheltering them, you can really have some problems. We get a lot of aphids on our milkweeds in our courtyard, and it can really have a devastating effect.
Jeanette tried water, but they were too numerous, and she wonders what Sprite water is.
So the Sprite, you know, soda.
It is Sprite.
Yeah, Sprite. We would spray it down on the ground underneath a plant before doing a beneficial insect release, and that sugar kind of makes it seem like there's aphids or there's some sort of pest problem going on in the shrub above it, and it tells the beneficial insects to, hey, stick around and find the food.
Good. Well, this has been great. I really want to thank you all for joining us tonight for the Native Plant Hotline and helping out. Steve Goin, Director of Plant Facilities at the Schuylkill Center. Thank you so much. Max Paschall, who's a native plant coordinator, works with Steve, and he's the guru of our native plant cell. Tam Paulus has been a wonderful volunteer with our native plant program for years at the Schuylkill Center. Thank you so much. John Janick is the host of Good Host Plans. And so go check out his website at Good Host Plans. Thank you, John, for your partnership for many years. Everybody, thank you all for coming. Next week, we're going to do the story in rocks. Feel free to unmute yourself and thank any of our guests. Say hello, say thank you very much, and good night. Thank you all.